This is Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM. I'm Scott Bertram, and with me on the line is State Senator Mike Shirkey. Senator, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Scott. Thank you very much for having me on today.
Always appreciate your time, Senator, and we can start out our talk today with some good news, and that's the very recent announcement from Ford Motor Company about investments in 3 Michigan manufacturing plants. And that's just coming out literally as we speak, as some details are in Wayne, the Flat Rock Assembly Plant, and Romeo Engine Plant. So there are 3 locations that look like they're getting significant investments. Do you know anything more than what we know right now?
I don't know too many more details, although Charlie Pride did mention it to me the other day. He's their government liaison in Lansing. And but to me, Scott, it's, first of all, it's an affirmation of all the kinds of things that we've been doing for the last 6 years to make Michigan more attractive for investment. And it's also a nod to a wonderful corporate citizen, Ford Motor Company, who has been a stalwart, not just for Michigan, but for the country. You recall, I think, that they were the one lone large auto manufacturer in the United States that didn't take government money
Right.
to get them to dig themselves out of what was a pretty severe recession in the auto industry, and bless them for that. And I think they're an outstanding example for all of us in business and what can be done if you just put your mind to it and put your nose to the grindstone. So I'm excited about these jobs, and I think, again, it's an affirmation of making Michigan a better place to invest. And we love the fact that Ford Motor Company is one of our anchors.
What does a healthy Ford, a healthy General Motors mean, not just to the city of Detroit, but to the state of Michigan as a whole?
Well, you'll notice also that they're Ford Motor, not in this particular announcement, but the auto industry in general, are sneaking out across the state and other locations.
Mm-hmm.
And the auto industry is maybe the only other industry or only other product line that has driven more technology advancement than the auto industry over the course of the century is NASA. And the kinds of technological developments that are a result of mass production of automobiles, or now the new buzzword is mobility, drives all kinds of innovations in other industries as well. And so we are kind of like the foundation for lots of products and services that allow economic development, not just in Michigan, but across the country. And for that to continue to be based here in Michigan, I think bodes well for us in the future, because, like I said, this is going to spur investments in other companies' support for the auto industry and new product ideas that are maybe not even related to the auto industry. So it's pretty cool, and we're just fortunate to have that as a foundation. We don't have sunshine as our foundation, like
Right.
Florida might, but I think we've got 2 things just as important. That's the heartbeat of the auto industry and plenty of fresh water.
State Senator Mike Shirkey is with us. It's Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM. I'm Scott Bertram. You can find him online, senatormikeshirkey.com. Also on Facebook as well. He serves Branch, Hillsdale, Jackson counties in the 16th State Senate District. You recently asked your constituents an online poll, and there's also a bill proposed by one of your colleagues that would put the states on uniform year-round time, basically ending daylight saving time. I have to admit, I've never really given this 2 thoughts in terms of going one way or the other and stopping the changing of the clocks. What's the push to do so, or who wants to stop the changing of the clocks?
Well, about 65% of the respondents to our poll, I will first admit to you that it's not a scientific poll. It was just posted on all of our different social media outlets.
Right.
And oftentimes, Scott, if we get 2,000 or 3,000 responses, it's a good response. We're now approaching 27,000 responses, and it's overwhelming that people just don't particularly care for changing their clocks twice a year. I think it actually is going to be forcing a different conversation, and that is, should Michigan look at what time zone is best associated with versus Central versus Eastern?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that this bill is going to, get enough traction to actually result in action, but I'm a firm believer that every topic is worthy of consideration. You can find lots of studies, lots of academic studies that indicate that it's troubling and a burden for kids in school, making the time changes, particularly the one in the spring. And so that's the genesis behind it. Representative Pete Lucido is the energy behind it right now. I do think Representative Leutheiser from the Hillsdale area is chairing the committee. That there was a hearing on it last week or week before, and so we'll have to just kind of wait and see, what happens from here.
All right, State Senator Mike Shirkey with us on Radio Free Hillsdale 101.7 FM. A topic we've talked to you many times about during our conversations is opioid addiction and the battle against it. I know there's a package of bills just introduced in the state Senate. You have one that you are specifically sponsoring. What is this? What might these bills be able to do to help with this problem?
Well, the Senate Health Policy Committee, which I'm privileged to chair, is the aggregator of all the different bills that are associated with attacking the opioid abuse problem that we're facing in our culture. And we've divided into four categories, Scott: supply, education, treatment, and law enforcement. And then there's a broad array of bills that fit into one or more of those categories, all aimed at arresting the growth of abuse. On the supply side, of course, is things like limiting physicians to a maximum amount of doses in the first prescription to a new patient, and so that there's a closer scrutiny. Unfortunately, we find some physicians, including some dentists, that will, they may have a minor surgery or a molar extraction or something like that, and will prescribe a couple 3 weeks worth of opioid-based painkillers, just to avoid having to respond to a pain call, on a Friday night or a Saturday morning or something. And I'm not casting a broad net on our medical providers. These are narrow. There's a narrow niche of providers that do that.
Sure.
Another one, and I think this is a bill that I've sponsored, and I fully acknowledge that it's a bit controversial, but to me it goes toward the notion that I don't think we have a high enough awareness of how responsible, the level of responsibility we have when we receive a prescription for these dangerous drugs. I maintain that opioids, based on real data that I can show anybody anytime, opioids are more dangerous than guns. And when you and I have a gun in our possession, the law holds us accountable to make sure that it doesn't get into the wrong hands,
right.
It's not too accessible to children, et cetera, and so forth. And so this bill would require a conversation to occur between a prescriber and the recipient and say, listen, you're getting this prescription. You need to acknowledge that these are now in your control. You're responsible. If they get in the wrong hands, you could be subject to a felony. Like I said, I'm not afraid at all of the debate that's going to cause. I'm not sure it'll ultimately get turned into a law, but it certainly will cause us to have that conversation, and I believe it's perfectly legitimate based on the data we have in front of us.
And it seems like, Senator, this is an issue that is reaching a tipping point. I think we heard a lot about it during even during the campaign for some state local lawmakers in 2016. Sure. But there are books, there are studies, there are long form journalism pieces really showing the damage that the opioid addiction is doing, the number of people who are ending up in emergency rooms with overdoses in these small towns throughout Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, elsewhere. It just seems like right now is when people are starting to open their eyes and say, man, we really have to address this. It's a national tragedy. It's a national problem we have to address head on.
I'm not one to cast aspersions on the pharmaceutical industry too quickly, but I will say that you can trace this back to when we started paying more attention to pain, and the pendulum may have swung too far in one direction where the pain wasn't being acknowledged properly. Mm-hmm. And then the pharmaceutical companies came in with lots of options here. But I think that the newest thing that I've learned in most recent hearings, Scott, is that we all have different opioid receptors in our brains, and that some people literally can become addicted to opioids on their first dose. And I think if I've challenged the industry who made that claim to present data, because if that's really true, then I think that speaks to the need. Again, I'm not a big government mandate guy and regulation guy, but I think it speaks to the need to do so.
State Senator Mike Shirkey with us, serving the 16th State Senate District, Branch, Hillsdale, Jackson counties. It's Radio Free Hillsdale, 101.7 FM. Want to let you promote, just before we go, a coffee hour coming up with constituents. It's Friday, March 31st, 8:30 to 9:30, and this is in Bronson, so a little bit, southwest of Coldwater is what we're talking about, right?
Right. It's the westernmost part of the Senate District, and it sometimes doesn't get all the attention it deserves. And so last Friday I was in Bronson reading to a bunch of kids for March's Reading Month, and then this coming Friday I'll be there for a coffee hour, and I hope folks within your listening voice can respond to it, and look forward to seeing them.
And that's Friday, March 31st, 8:30 to 9:30 with State Senator Mike Shirkey, who you can also find online at senatormikeshirkey.com or on Facebook, too. Just search for Senator Mike Shirkey. Senator, thank you so much for your time. Always appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Scott. Have a great day.